The park went silent the moment it happened. So silent that even the wind seemed to freeze in midair. Families who were laughing seconds earlier stopped mid-sentence. Kids paused their games. Birds lifted their heads as if nature itself sensed something terribly wrong. Because right there in the middle of Riversedge National Park, the head guard Mason lifted his boot and kicked Steven Seagal straight in the face. It wasn't a warning tap, not an accidental bump. It was a full-force, arrogant, deliberate kick fueled by ego and misplaced authority. "Yeah, that's right, old man," Mason barked, puffing his chest as if he had won some victory. "This is my park, my rules, and I don't let slow, useless people like you sit wherever they want. Now get out before I make you." His voice echoed across the open field. People gasped. A couple sitting nearby froze mid-bite. A teenage boy recording with his phone whispered, "Bro, did he just kick Steven Seagal?" But Mason didn't hear anything. His pride was too loud inside his own head. He strutted back a step, smirking, spinning his baton around his fingers like he was the hero of some movie. Except he wasn't, and he had no idea who he had just touched. Steven Seagal didn't stumble. He didn't fall. He didn't even react the way any normal person would have. He simply lifted his head slowly, almost peacefully, as if he had just felt a raindrop, not a kick to the face. His eyes, calm and unreadable, focused on Mason with a stillness that made half the crowd shiver. There was no anger, no rage, no aggression, just a quiet, controlled disappointment, much scarier than any shout could ever be. Mason scoffed. "What's with that look? You gonna cry? Huh? Think you're tough? Try me. I'll put you on the ground so fast." But before he could finish his sentence, 3 people in the crowd called out almost in unison, "Stop. Do you even know who that is? Guard? You're making a huge mistake." Mason ignored every voice. He raised his chin higher, soaking in the attention like it was applause. To him, Steven was just another old guy taking up space. To everyone else, this was a disaster unfolding in slow motion. Because what Mason didn't know, what he couldn't even imagine, was that the man he had just kicked was the one person in this entire park he should never ever have touched. And in the next few minutes, he would learn that lesson the hard way. Riversedge National Park was usually a peaceful sanctuary, the kind of place where stressed parents brought their kids to breathe fresh air, where elderly couples walked hand in hand under tall pine trees, where joggers followed winding dirt paths that smelled of earth and freedom. But that morning, the peace felt shaky. A tension hung in the air the moment guard Mason arrived for his shift. Mason wasn't just any guard. He was the loud one, the pushy one, the one who treated his badge like a crown and the park like his personal kingdom. He stomped across the picnic area with his reflective sunglasses, polished boots, and an ego 10 times bigger than his actual authority. Every step he took sounded like a warning. Every command he barked made people flinch. "Hey, no bikes on the grass. You don't feed the ducks. Read the sign. Move your tent 2 in to the left." "Yes, 2 in." I said 2. Parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. Children hid behind their mothers. Even squirrels seemed to vanish into the trees when he passed under his breath. One man whispered to his wife, "He acts like he owns the place." To which she quietly replied, "And one day someone is going to put him in his place." Little did she know how soon that someone would arrive. Steven Seagal walked into the park with none of Mason's noise, none of his ego, and none of his theatrics. He moved like a whisper, calm, grounded, centered, a plain dark shirt, old boots, hands relaxed at his sides. His presence was quiet but powerful in a way most people couldn't define. Steven didn't come with bodyguards or cameras. He came alone, like he always did whenever he wanted to feel the world breathe. He nodded politely at people he passed. He smiled gently at a toddler holding a tiny flower. He even helped an elderly woman pick up a water bottle she'd dropped. To everyone else, he was just a humble man, enjoying the morning. To Mason, he was a target. "Hey, you!" Mason shouted, marching toward him like a soldier invading enemy territory. Several nearby visitors turned to look. Some recognized Steven instantly, their eyes widening in surprise. Others simply paused, sensing trouble from Mason's tone. Steven, however, didn't react to the aggression. He simply turned his head toward the guard and offered a small, calm nod. "Yes," he asked quietly. "That bench is off limits." Mason snapped, pointing to a wooden seat near the lake. "Park policy, authorized personnel only. Move." Steven looked at the bench with a thoughtful expression. "I didn't see the sign," he said gently. "There doesn't have to be a sign," Mason shot back. "I said, it's off limits, that's enough." A few people exchanged uncomfortable looks. Mason's tone wasn't one of authority. It was one of a bully who enjoyed creating rules that didn't exist. Steven's voice remained soft. "I've been sitting on that bench for many years," he said. "Well, not today, Grandpa." Mason scoffed. A young ranger standing nearby Rivera. A quiet, respectful man took a step forward. "Mason, maybe let him back off, rookie." Mason barked before he could finish. "I don't need advice from a trainee." Rivera clenched his jaw but didn't argue. He stood there silently, clearly uncomfortable with how Mason treated people. Steven began to walk toward the bench again slowly, not challenging Mason, just tired of unnecessary confrontation. But Mason stepped in front of him and jabbed a finger toward his chest. I said, "Move." The guard growled, "I don't care who you think you are. This is my area, my rules." People in the area grew still. An elderly man whispered, "That's Steven Seagal." "Why is that guard talking to him like that?" A teenage girl muttered to her friend, "He's really going to regret this." But Mason didn't listen to a single voice around him. Authority had blinded him. Ego had deafened him. And Steven, calm as a lake at sunrise, simply breathed in quietly and said, "You should treat people with more patience." Those words had the effect of gasoline on a fire. "Oh yeah," Mason snarled. "You want to give me advice now? You think you're some wise old master? You think I can't deal with a guy like you?" He stepped closer, invading Steven's space, trying to provoke him. Steven didn't flinch, didn't lift his hands, didn't show fear. He only said, "I'm not here to cause trouble." But Mason wasn't listening anymore. He was building up to something reckless, something violent. People sensed it. Someone whispered, "He's going to snap." A mother grabbed her child and moved back. Rivera, the young ranger, took another step forward, but Mason held up a hand to stop him. "No one interferes," he snapped. "This guy needs to learn." Steven watched him carefully, but said nothing. The calm before a storm isn't loud. It's silent. So silent that even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Mason's pride was boiling. Steven's peace was steady. Two opposites stood facing each other, and the next few seconds were going to change everything. Everything. The air grew heavy like the whole park was holding its breath. Families stepped back. A couple abandoned their picnic blanket. Joggers slowed to a stop, sensing a storm building where moments ago there was calm. Mason's chest rose and fell faster with each breath. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of someone who thought he had absolute power. He took another bold step forward, boots crunching against the gravel. "You think you can talk back to me?" he snarled. "I told you to move." When I tell someone to move, they move. Steven simply stood there, posture relaxed, face unbothered, as if he was listening to a child throwing a tantrum. He didn't puff his chest. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even blink aggressively. And that calmness infuriated Mason even more. People exchanged glances, whispering urgently, "That guy is insane. Why is he provoking Steven Seagal? Does he not recognize him? My God, he's going to lose his job." But Mason lived inside his own echo chamber of arrogance. He didn't see the worried looks. He didn't hear the warnings. All he saw was a quiet man who refused to obey him. Rivera, the young ranger, finally couldn't stay silent. He stepped forward again, voice trembling but firm. "Mason, that's enough. Seriously, let him be. This isn't how we treat visitors." Mason whipped around, rage flaring in his eyes. "Shut up, rookie," he barked. "Go pick up trash or something. This is real guard work." Rivera clenched his fists. He looked like he wanted to argue. But Steven gave him a small shake of the head, as if telling him quietly, "It's fine." Let it go, but it wasn't. Fine. Not anymore. Mason turned back toward Steven, nostrils flaring. "You think you're better than me, huh? You walk around like you own the place." Steven answered softly, "Ownership isn't the same as control." The words were calm, peaceful even, but they struck Mason like a slap. His ego exploded. "Oh, that's it," he growled. "That tone, that attitude. Let's see how calm you stay after this." Before anyone could react, Mason lunged forward, fist raised, but Steven simply moved a half step back, letting the punch slice through empty air. The crowd gasped. Steven didn't block it. He didn't counter it. He simply wasn't there. That was what humiliated Mason most. "You dodged me," he spat. "You think you're fast? You think you're tough?" He swung again, a sloppy, angry swing. Steven shifted his weight slightly, and the punch missed again. Mason's face reamed. People whispered, "He's not even trying. Steven's just standing there. Mason is embarrassing himself." But Mason was too far gone. "You want to play games?" he shouted. His voice cracked with rage. "Fine, try dodging this." He lifted his leg higher, higher. Someone screamed, "No, don't." And then it happened. With a burst of reckless aggression, Mason swung his boot and kicked Steven Seagal in the face. The impact echoed a harsh, sickening thud that seemed to vibrate across the lake. Children covered their eyes. A woman gasped so loudly she nearly choked. Rivera flinched as if he had been kicked. Mason stumbled back from the force of his own strike, panting heavily, waiting for Steven to fall. But Steven didn't fall. He didn't stumble. He didn't grab his face. He didn't even blink twice. He just lowered his head slightly, wiped the dust from his cheek with 2 fingers, and looked at Mason with an expression so calm, so disappointed that it sucked the air out of the entire park. Mason took a step back, suddenly unsure. What? What are you made of?" he muttered. But Steven didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than any threat. The crowd watched, frozen in awe. People were recording now. But even through the screens, they could feel it. The shift in energy, the shift in power. Mason's rage wavered, replaced by something new. A flicker of fear. You playing tough?" he said, voice shaking slightly. "You think that didn't hurt me?" A man in the crowd muttered loudly, "No, he thinks it didn't matter." Mason heard it, and panic crept deeper. He swung again, this time trying to punch Steven's jaw. Steven didn't even move his feet. He tilted his head half an inch, and the punch missed so cleanly it embarrassed everyone watching. "What the?" Mason muttered. Steven finally spoke. "You don't have to do this." But Mason was drowning in his own pride. have to," he snarled. "You're going down." He tried a final desperate charge, but before he could get close, a loud engine rumble sliced through the tension. Everyone turned. 3 black SUVs rolled down the park trail, tires crunching dirt, windows tinted, flags fluttering subtly on the front. Not ordinary vehicles, government vehicles. Every ranger stiffened. Rivera whispered, voice trembling, "Oh no, 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 not today. Not when he's here." Mason blinked. What now? The SUV stopped. Doors swung open, and what stepped out would change everything Mason thought he knew about power, authority, and the man he just kicked in the face. The real storm was only beginning. For a moment, no one moved. Not Steven, not Mason, not the families scattered across the grass. The world seemed to pause, as if the trees, the lakeside breeze, and even the distant chirping birds were all waiting to see what would happen next. Then came the low rumble again. The engines deep, steady, official. Every person turned toward the sound. The 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop near the main park entrance. Their tinted windows reflected the sunlight like dark mirrors. Cold, unreadable, intimidating. Rivera's face went pale. "Oh no," he whispered. "Not today. Not during his shift." His voice trembled, not out of fear for himself, but for what was about to happen to Mason. Mason, still breathing hard from his outburst, puffed his chest again. "What's this?" he muttered. "Some VIP showing up?" He tried to laugh, but the sound came out thin and nervous. The adrenaline was fading. Reality was creeping back in. The crowd parted instinctively, forming a path between the SUVs and Steven. People lowered their phones. Even children fell silent. Sensing the shift in atmosphere, the doors of the first SUV opened slowly. A tall man in a federal uniform stepped out. Stern face, polished badge, crisp, dark suit, then the second door. Another official, then the third, the National Park Security Director himself. People gasped softly. "That's the director. What is he doing here? Is this connected to what just happened?" Rivera snapped to attention, standing straighter than he had all morning. His hands moved to his belt, posture respectful, eyes forward. Mason snorted and muttered, "Relax, rookie. These guys aren't here for you." Rivera didn't answer because he already knew exactly who they were here for. The director scanned the park once, his gaze sharp and serious. His eyes flicked across the startled faces, past the confused families, past Mason's stiff stance until they landed on Steven. Instant recognition filled his face. Not surprise, not confusion. Respect. Deep, urgent, almost fearful respect. He immediately started walking toward him, the other officials following close behind, not running, but moving with purpose. Mason squinted. "Why are they looking at him?" he muttered. "Why him?" No one answered. The director reached Steven and did something no one expected. He straightened his coat, lowered his head slightly, and spoke with absolute professionalism. "Mr. Seagal, sir," he said, voice firm but respectful. "We've been tracking your visit. My team and I are here to escort you to the headquarters for today's oversight briefing. Your security audit needs your approval." The crowd erupted in whispers. "Mr. Seagal? The Steven Seagal? He's working with the Federal Security Department." Oh, this is bad for that guard." Mason blinked rapidly. "Why, Mr. Who?" He turned toward Rivera, confused, sweating. Is he talking about that Steven Seagal?" Rivera didn't answer. His silence said everything. Steven, still calm, looked at the director. "There's been a problem," he said quietly. The director stiffened. "What kind of problem, sir?" Steven turned his head slightly toward Mason. He didn't point. He didn't accuse. He simply glanced at him. The director followed the look. His jaw tightened instantly. "What happened?" he asked, voice colder now. Less formal, more dangerous. Before Steven could respond, a woman from the crowd spoke up, unable to hold it in. "That guard kicked him." Another man added, "He insulted him for no reason." A third voice chimed in, "He attacked him twice." Steven didn't even fight back. Rhea looked down, ashamed that his uniform matched Mason's. Mason's bravado cracked like thin glass. I didn't know who he was," he stuttered. "How was I supposed to know? He looked like just some old..." He stopped. Too late. The words hung heavily in the air. Steven lifted a hand slightly, stopping the director from speaking. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said softly. "I came for a quiet morning." The calmness somehow made everything worse for Mason. The kinder Steven spoke, the harder the consequences felt. The director nodded slowly. "We'll address this immediately." Mason swallowed, blinking fast. "Wait, hold on. This is a misunderstanding." He tried. "I was just enforcing policy. He didn't respect my orders. He didn't. You kicked him in the face." Someone from the crowd reminded him with kids watching. Another added with the rookie trying to stop you. A third said Mason's legs began to shake. Rivera stepped back, distancing himself from the disaster. He looked at Steven with quiet gratitude, almost admiration. Steven nodded at him as if acknowledging the Rares' earlier attempt to help. The director studied Mason for a long, heavy moment. A silence followed. Not a peaceful silence, a silence thick with consequences. Finally, he spoke. "You," he said to Mason, "have no idea what you've done." And the worst part, it wasn't over because the reveal, the full truth, hadn't even been spoken yet. The emergency clinic inside Redwood National Park wasn't designed for chaos. But tonight, it was overflowing with it. The moment the ambulance rolled in, nurses rushed toward the stretcher carrying the unconscious park guard Mason Doyle. His face was a map of bruises and swelling every inch, a reminder of the mistake he'd made. Steven Seagal followed behind, calm and collected, walking with his hands behind his back as if this were nothing more than another long day. Ranger Elena jogged beside him, still shaken from everything that happened. "Saul," she whispered, "I still don't understand how you stayed so calm. He could have seriously hurt someone." "He tried," Seagal replied, voice low. "But people like him, they hurt themselves first." Elena nodded, though her eyes stayed glued to Mason. The arrogant guard who had strutted around the park, bragging about his no-nonsense authority, looked anything but intimidating now. His earlier confidence, his smirks, his threats, his reckless swing at Seagal had all vanished like dust in the wind. Inside the clinic, Dr. Hanley stepped forward, gay-haired and sharpied. "Get him to exam room 3, the doctor ordered, and someone check his vitals every 5 minutes. Two nurses wheeled Mason away. Dr. Hanley turned toward Seagal. "You're the one who brought him in." Seagal nodded. "He came at me first. I just redirected him." "That's what the ranger said too," Dr. Hanley replied, raising a brow. "Still, whatever you did, he's lucky to be alive." Elena cleared her throat. Dr. Mason wasn't acting like himself. He completely lost control. He wasn't following protocol. He wasn't even listening. Dr. Hanley sighed. "Well, maybe this will slow him down long enough for us to figure out what triggered it." Just then, a soft groan came from down the hallway. Mason was waking up. Elena instinctively stepped forward, but Seagal gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let him come back to reality slowly," he murmured. "People regret their mistakes before they confess them." They approached the exam room. Mason lay on the bed, eyes half open, wincing in pain. The proud guard who once barked orders like a drill sergeant now looked like a broken man trying to understand where everything went wrong. When he noticed Seagal standing in the doorway, his eyes widened in fear, confusion, and disbelief. "You," Mason whispered, voice hoarse. How did you do that?" Seagal didn't answer immediately. He stepped inside, hands calmly resting at his sides. "Mason," Elena said softly, "what happened out there? You weren't yourself." Mason swallowed hard. His jaw trembled. For the first time, the arrogance was gone. "I don't know," he croaked. "It was like everything inside me snapped. I saw him." He nodded toward Seagal and something in my head just exploded. I don't remember thinking. I just attacked. Elena exchanged a worried glance with the doctor. Seagal leaned slightly closer. "You let anger choose your actions. Anger is a terrible instructor." Mason shut his eyes. "I thought you were mocking me. When you didn't move, when you didn't fight back, I got furious. And then you hit me once and I felt everything go black." "It wasn't a hit," Seagal corrected calmly. "It was a warning." A silence hung in the air, heavy, uncomfortable. The doctor exhaled. "Well, Mason, you're going to stay here overnight. You need evaluation for concussion, stress levels, and temperament issues." Mason nodded weakly. Embarrassment covered his face like a second layer of bruises. "Seagal," Mason whispered again, "why didn't you fight me? You could have destroyed me." Seagal looked him straight in the eyes. "Because real strength isn't about destroying someone," he said quietly. "It's about choosing not to." Those words hit harder than any punch could have. Mason looked away, blinking fast, swallowing guilt. Just then, another ranger, Tom Reeves, rushed in, breathless. "Elena, Seagal," Tom shouted. "You need to come outside. There's a situation." Elena stiffened. "What situation?" Tom looked pale. A group of tourists reported seeing movement near the restricted zone. Big movement. And they said the creatures were acting strange. Seagal's expression shifted calm but attentive. "It's starting," he murmured. Elena frowned. "What's starting?" Seagal stepped past Tom, heading toward the exit with steady precision. "The real reason I came to this park." Elena froze. Tom stared, and Mason, bruised and broken, watched helplessly as Steven Seagal walked toward something far more dangerous than an arrogant guard. Something that would make everything so far look small. The night outside Redwood National Park's clinic was colder than before. As if the forest itself sensed something shifting, a thick layer of fog rolled low along the ground. Hugging the earth in a silent, eerie crawl, Steven Seagal stepped out first, the building's fluorescent lights framing his silhouette. Elena and Ranger Tom followed quickly, both tense and unsure. Tom pointed toward the north ridge. The tourists said they saw movement near the old logging trail. They described it as huge, fast, not normal. Elena narrowed her eyes. "Bears." Tom shook his head. "They said, bears don't move like that." Seagal looked toward the dark tree line as though he could see through the fog. His expression didn't change, but something in his stance sharpened. "Whatever it was," he said slowly, "it wasn't acting on instinct. It was reacting to something." Tom swallowed. "Reacting? To what?" "To whatever pushed Mason over the edge," Seagal replied. A chill passed through Elena. "You think the same thing affecting him is affecting the animals?" "I don't think," Seal said. "I know." He began walking toward the ranger truck, and both rangers hurried after him. Elena climbed into the passenger seat, Tom into the back. Seagal drove calm, precise, no wasted motions like a man who'd driven through danger a H100 times before. The headlights cut through the fog, illuminating the towering redwoods, standing like ancient guardians. The deeper they drove into the forest, the quieter the world became. Even the insects had gone silent. Tom griped his flashlight. "I don't like this. The whole forest feels wrong." Seagal didn't look back. Nature warns us before it breaks. Listen to it. As the truck rolled to a stop near the old logging trail, Elena's eyes widened. Deep, fresh claw marks slashed across several tree trunks. Long, jagged, and far higher than any animal in the park could reach. "That's impossible," she breathed. "Nothing here stands that tall." Tom stepped forward, examining one of the marks with trembling fingers. "This is at least 9 FT up." Seagal crouched near the soil, touching a print pressed deep into the mud. It was wide, powerful, and spread unnaturally, almost distorted. Elena watched him, anxiety tightening her chest. "You know what did this, don't you?" Seagal stood slowly. "I've seen signs like this before. Not here, but overseas." Tom frowned. "Overseas? From what? An animal?" Seagal shook his head. "Not exactly." Before they could ask more, a low rumble echoed from the trees ahead. Not a growl. Something heavier. Something dragging through brush with deliberate force. Tom raised his flashlight, hand trembling. What was that? Seagal's voice dropped to a whisper. "Stay behind me." They followed him into the trail, moving slowly. The moonlight filtered through thick branches, casting long shadows across the ground. Every step felt heavier than the last. Then, suddenly, snap! A massive branch broke somewhere to their left. Elena spun, flashlight shaking. Something's moving. Seagal remained perfectly still, listening, feeling the vibration in the air. Then he pointed up there on the ridge. 3 silhouettes stood between the trees. Big silhouettes, wrong silhouettes. Their movements jerky, irregular, like they were struggling inside their own bodies. Elena whispered, horrified. "Oh my God." The creatures stepped into a sliver of moonlight, and her breath caught. They were bears, but not like any bears she had ever seen. Their eyes glowed faintly, an unnatural shimmer like something burning behind them. Their limbs twitched as if fighting against invisible restraints. Their breathing was ragged but powerful. Tom stumbled back. "They're sick rabies. Toxic exposure." "No," Seagal said softly. "They're being influenced." Elena stared. Influenced by what? Seagal's jaw clenched. By the same illegal compound Mason was exposed to. Tom jerked his head toward him. "What compound?" Seagal exhaled. "A control agent. Experimental. Highly illegal. Developed to amplify aggression and limit rational thinking. Someone's testing it in this forest." Elena felt the ground tilt beneath her. "Are you saying someone used it on animals? And Mason was exposed accidentally?" "Yes." "And these bears, they are the test subjects." Seagal finished. The monstrous bears stepped closer, groaning deeply. Their muscles twitched violently. Their claws dug into the earth. Tom backed away, heart racing. "We're dead. We're actually dead." "Quiet," Seagal commanded. The largest bear suddenly charged. Trees shook as its mass thundered toward them. Elena screamed. Tom froze, but Seagal moved with a speed none of them could process. He stepped forward, angled his body, and guided the bear's momentum. The creature slammed sideways into a fallen log, roaring in pain and confusion. Elena couldn't believe her eyes. "How? How did you?" "No sudden moves," Seagal said calmly. "They're not attacking us. They're reacting to the pain inside them." The other 2 bears shifted, growling. Tom whispered, "What do we do?" Seagal glanced back at them, his face steady, unshaken. "We find who did this," he said, "and we stop them." Elena inhaled sharply. "But where do we start?" Seagal pointed toward a faint trail of chemical residue glowing under the moonlight. Whoever's responsible led them deeper into the forest. He turned, eyes hardening. "And we're going after them." Fog curled around the forest floor like a living thing, glowing faintly in the rising moonlight. Steven Seagal walked ahead with steady steps, following the thin trail of chemical residue that shimmered under the beam of Elena's flashlight. Ranger Tom stayed close behind her, breathing hard, trying not to look back at the mutated bears they had narrowly escaped. No one spoke for several minutes. The only sounds were the rustling leaves and the faint drip of something deeper in the woods, something metallic, unnatural. Finally, Elena whispered, "I still can't believe someone brought something like this into our park." Seagal didn't stop walking. "People who want control will use anything to get it, even things they don't understand," Tom swallowed. "But why here? Why our forest?" "Because it's isolated," Seagal replied. "And because no one was supposed to find out, the trail curved toward an old abandoned ranger station, one that hadn't been used in over 20 years. The wood was warped, windows shattered, vines crawling across the walls, but light flickered inside, weak, unsteady." Elena grabbed Tom's arm. "Someone's in there." Seagal raised a hand for silence. The three of them crept closer. Through a broken window, they could see a small lab set up on top of dusty tables, vials, injection guns, empty canisters labeled with hazard symbols. Papers were scattered everywhere, covered in formulas and dosage levels. And sitting at the center of the room, hunched over a blood-stained notebook, was Mason. But it wasn't the Mason they remembered. His eyes were sunken, glowing faintly. His skin twitched in unnatural spasms. His breathing was uneven, almost animalistic, and yet his expression was full of heartbreak. Elena gasped softly. He's still alive." Mason's head snapped up, sensing movement. "Stay back." His voice cracked like dry wood. "I tried to stop it. They made me test it. They said it was harmless, said it was just for crowd control." He winced hard, grabbing his skull. A shudder rippled through his body, but it wasn't harmless. Seagal stepped forward, calm and unafraid. "Mason," he said quietly, "who gave you the compound?" Mason's breathing hitched. "A private contractor, military rejects, trying to sell a formula to the highest bidder. They wanted the bears to attack so they could record combat stress." "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Tom and Elena exchanged horrified looks. Seagal nodded slowly. "Where are they now?" Mason pointed toward the back exit with a trembling hand. "They ran when the bears broke free. They left me here. To turn into this," his voice cracked with something surprisingly human regret. "I was wrong today," he whispered. "I let my ego, my anger, my pride tell me I was more important than everyone else." He looked at Seagal with tears forming at the edges of his glowing eyes. "And I hurt people because of it." The woods outside trembled. Another roar echoed farther this time, but still close enough to shake the walls. Elena stepped forward hesitantly. "Mason, we can get help. We can." He shook his head violently. "No, I'm too far gone. But you can still stop them. Stop the ones who brought this here." He looked right at Seagal. You're not just some old man. I knew that the moment I saw you stand still after I kicked you." He winced again, pain ripping through him. "You're the calm I never had." Seagal rested a hand on the doorway. Not too close, but close enough that Mason could see he wasn't afraid. "Everyone makes mistakes," Seagal said quietly. "But owning them, that takes strength too." Mason let out a shaking breath. I'm sorry for everything. Before anyone could say more, the floor shuddered. A violent roar tore through the trees. The infected bears were coming back. Seagal turned to Elena and Tom. Get out now. Elena hesitated. What about Mason? Mason forced a weak smile. Go. I'll hold the back exit closed, as long as I can. There was no time to argue. Seagal guided the Rangers through the broken front doorway. As they ran into the night, Seagal glanced back over his shoulder, just in time to see Mason brace himself against the old wooden door. Determination replacing fear. For the first time that day, Mason looked truly brave. Moments later, the forest erupted behind them. By the time the sun rose over Redwood National Park, the illegal operation had been shut down. Authorities had swarmed the forest, and the infected animals were recovering under controlled treatment. But the biggest change wasn't in the park. It was in the people who witnessed everything. Respect, humility, courage. These weren't just words anymore. Steven Seagal didn't give speeches. He didn't need to. His action said everything. True strength isn't loud. True authority doesn't need to prove itself. And true respect is shown to everyone, especially when no one is watching. If you believe humility is the real power, type respect in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I want to thank every good soul personally. Thanks for watching.